When we went out to talk with experienced crawler dozer operators to ask them to share their operating tips with us, most of them just laughed. I can't tell you how to do it. I just do it. There's no doubt about it. Experience and familiarity with your particular machine are the keys to being productive. Still, there are techniques that have been developed through the years that are worth sharing. Passing along knowledge and experience to younger people coming up is good for the industry. And some of you guys who've been around since you dug the Panama Canal may even learn something too. In this program, we'll cover 5 areas: job preparation, productivity, slot dozing, slope work, and tree and stump clearing. Before you begin any job, make sure you've done your prep work. Walk the job site. Look for hazards like drop-offs, soft spots, power lines, potholes, and debris that could damage the machine's undercarriage.
Good afternoon, Diggers Hotline. This is Bonnie.
Make sure the one-call center has been notified and the locating service has marked the utility lines. Discovering a buried electric, gas, or fiber optic cable with your machine can put an end to your day's work, your career, and maybe your life. Always inspect the machine before you start your shift. Your operator's manual will tell you the specifics, but be sure to check fluid levels and keep an eye out for worn parts, loose wires, or leaking components. Broken down machines don't move much dirt. And neglecting your machine won't make you very popular back at the shop either. Check your track tension. Maintaining proper track tension can reduce undercarriage wear by 50%. Before you get on the machine, take the time to plan your job. Don't just focus on your small portion. Visualize the entire finished job. Think about what you're trying to build and know what role you play in reaching the goal. Then plan your work accordingly. Otherwise, as the pros say, you're just pushing dirt. One last thing. Once you're on the machine, buckle up. Don't become another statistic. Whether you plan to work all day or you're taking 2 minutes to load onto a trailer, if this machine tips, the seatbelt can save your life. If you strip this machine down to the basics, you've got a powertrain and a blade. Brute force that moves earth and shapes the land. Some operators can make this big old machine spin and dance, but crawler dozers aren't built for grace. They're built for guts. They earn their keep when they're using full power to move a full blade of material. Working efficiently is important with all construction equipment, but especially so with a dozer. A few extra work cycles with a backhoe or skid steer loader might not add up to much, but operating costs are higher with a dozer. Unproductive passes waste time and fuel, contribute to undercarriage wear and tear, and they slow down the job. The pros told us to make every move count. Let's look at how. One operator told us there are 3 big things in dirt work. Don't fight Mother Nature. Let gravity work for you, not against you, and always maintain job site drainage. There's a lot of truth in those words, so let's look at them a little closer. Not fighting Mother Nature means adapting to on-site conditions. We all know that wet material is more difficult to move than dry. If your work area is a mud bowl, find another place to work until it dries up a bit. When the weather is dry, get as much work done as you can in the low-lying areas, because after a heavy rain, these areas will still be wet, while the higher, well-drained spots will be dry and can be worked. So, when it's dry, work down in the low spots. When it's wet, work up on the high, well-drained areas. If you have to work in wet material, try to make your pass while pushing the full depth of the wet material. This will place your dozer on firmer footing. Wider track pads may also help with flotation. To be on the safe side, make provisions for recovery operations in case the dozer becomes stuck. It might be a good idea to use a machine equipped with a winch. When you look at the big picture of your job, consider how you can put gravity to work for you. Dirt, like other things, flows downhill. Your job is to help it along. If there's an opportunity to move dirt even slightly downhill, it will be a boost to productivity. You'll save horsepower and fuel, and you'll be able to move bigger loads. Maintaining drainage could be another video in itself, but the principle is this. If the ground conditions are too wet, your machine can sit for days waiting for things to dry out. A better way is to have a drainage plan. Make sure that when you shut down each day, you've got a plan for water to run off the job site without creating a mess. Start at the low end of the drainage ditch and work up from there. That way, water has a place to run. During the workday, don't make such a deep cut that you can't bring it up to grade by the end of the day. In other words, don't dig a hole and leave it overnight to fill up. Have a plan for drainage. Another tip we heard from the pros was the importance of knowing when to do precise work and when to just move dirt. Some operators waste time trying to make every pass a finishing pass. In general, when dozing, hog out the dirt first, then finish it. Don't use finesse until you need to. Remember, make every move count. Productivity is a big topic, and you can spend a lifetime learning more. But to wrap up this section, let's look at one example that helps illustrate a few of the concepts of job productivity. Here is a profile view of an existing landscape. Next, here is an overlay of a finished project. In this case, a highway with a raised roadbed, 2 ditches, and slope banks. The job requires 2 areas that need to be cut and 3 areas that need to be filled. As you can see, there aren't really any opportunities for downhill cycles to take advantage of gravity. But another principle of productive dozing is that you never want to move the same dirt twice. So take advantage of the areas where cuts and fills are next to each other. To make this fill area in the roadbed, we can use the dirt from the nearest cut section, here. Now we're left with 2 similar areas, a ditch cut and a bank fill. It's a simple matter of cutting the ditch and filling the adjacent bank. If you have extra dirt, push it to where the scraper or grader can easily get to it. The pros develop an eye for grade that makes these decisions almost automatic. But taking the time to plan the most efficient way to move dirt always pays dividends. Slot dozing is a fairly common term used in the earth-moving business, but we found that not all operators understand what slot dozing is. One guy thought it meant catching a nap between shifts. What slot dozing really is a productive technique to use when faced with the challenge of shaping a wide expanse of dirt, like a parking lot or a building site. The basic premise behind slot dozing is to minimize side spillage and keep as much material in front of the blade as possible. In normal dozing, material that sloughs off to the side is lost during that machine pass. It has to be picked up and moved again. With slot dozing, you leave an uncut section on both sides of the blade. The uncut sections form a windrow that prevents side spillage, keeping the dirt in front of the blade. As you work inside the channel or slot, you cut until your blade is full. Then you carry the load the rest of the way. This reduces fuel consumption because you aren't cutting the entire length of the pass. You cut in the beginning, then you just carry the load the rest of the way. Once you've moved the bulk of the material in a given area, begin removing the uncut sections. Since there is little or no side resistance, this material moves easily. After your blade fills, swing back into the slot to minimize side spillage as you carry the material. Slot dozing can dramatically increase your productivity. Like anything else, it takes practice. The pros make it look easy. Just remember, the pros were amateurs once. Crawler dozers excel in slope work. The low center of gravity and the power in the tracks allow it to do jobs in areas that other machines can't or shouldn't touch. It's important, though, to understand your machine's limits, as rollovers are a leading cause of operator injuries and fatalities. Don't think you can jump clear of a tumbling machine. Always wear your seatbelt and be sure the ROPS is in good condition. On slope work, remember not to fight Mother Nature. If possible, push downhill to take advantage of gravity. Your machine won't have to work as hard to push the same amount of dirt. For finishing or dressing a slope that isn't too steep, you can work across it. On steeper slopes, use a diagonal pattern. This provides more stability and less side slippage than working across a slope. The smoothest finishing jobs happen when the dirt is worked from at least two different directions. It's the same concept as an orbital sander on wood. Irregularities get smoothed out if attacked from more than one direction. When doing finishing passes, your blade should overlap the previous path. This acts as your guide to depth. On a slope, dirt will fall to the lower side of the blade, forming a windrow. On succeeding passes, pick up this windrow and use it to fill holes and other irregularities in the terrain. When finishing or dressing, working with a partially loaded blade is better than working with an empty one. It smooths out the ride and distributes the fines across the width of the blade. When dozing downhill, take advantage of gravity. Pile several loads at the brink of the hill, then push them to the bottom in one pass. You can move a lot of dirt in a single push. Travel all the way to the bottom of the hill with each load. Remember to keep the dozer under control at all times. Many newer machines have hydrostatic transmissions with automatic holdback. But on machines with torque converters, never coast downhill in neutral and don't change gears while going downhill. Select the correct gear range before starting down the grade. Save the wild rides for the amusement park, not the job site. When the job requires that you move dirt up a slope, make your first cuts at the top of the hill. This establishes an at-grade benchmark, providing a reference point to eye up the rest of the job, and it clears a path for the lower sections of dirt. When pushing dirt off a high wall or a steep slope, don't push each load over the edge. Instead, leave a bladeful at the edge to act as a stop. Let the second bladeful push the first one over the edge. This keeps your machine back away from danger. For decades, dozers have been used to clear trees and remove stumps. If done safely, it can be an effective method, but there are hazards above, at ground level, and under your machine. Here are a few tips to consider when tree clearing. Overhead hazards include dead branches and limbs that could fall. Be sure your machine includes a falling object protective structure. Watch for branches and whips lying on the ground, too. Avoid pushing a tree into an area where it will strike another tree. You can't predict where the tree will go if it hits something on its way down. Always push trees into clear areas with no people or obstructions around. Pushing over a mature tree with a big root structure should only be done by an experienced operator. Here is one technique for doing the job. First, determine the tree's natural direction of lean. This is the best direction for pushing the tree over. Start on the side opposite the proposed direction of fall and make a V-cut deep enough to sever some of the large roots. Cut side 2 and side 3. Then push the tree over with the cutting edge, and as the tree starts to fall, reverse the dozer quickly to avoid the rising root mass. The fourth side acts as a hinge. If the tree doesn't completely fall with the first push, back up and push from under the root ball. The hinge will keep the tree from falling back onto the machine. If you need greater pushing leverage, build an earth ramp on the same side as the original cut. This allows you to push higher up on the tree. Be especially careful of dead trees and limbs. They can snap off and fall onto the machine. Also keep an eye out for debris that can accumulate in the engine compartment and under the machine and start on fire. There are some time-saving techniques for stump removal jobs too. Small stumps can sometimes be removed with little or no root cutting. Center the blade on the stump. When forward movement stops, move the forward neutral reverse lever to neutral and then back to forward. This rocking action loosens the stump. By stopping the tracks momentarily, then re-engaging them, the jolt is enough to overcome the resistance. On larger stumps, cut the roots on two sides. Notice how the blade is angled and tilted to cut the roots. Next, center the blade on the stump. This allows you to use the power of both tracks. By rocking the stump and raising the blade as you push it, the dozer produces more force to break it free. On a very large stump, dig a V-trench completely around it to sever the roots. The first trench should be deep enough to cut off all the roots on that side. This may take several passes. Next, back up 90 degrees and cut the roots on that side. On this pass, deposit the dirt into the trench created during your first cut. This reduces backfill time once the stump is removed. Next, reverse 90 degrees to cut the third side. Again, the dirt is deposited into the previous trench. Notice that whenever the tracks stop, the operator uses counter rotation. This moves the blade farther away from the stump to a point where the root can be severed. In order to cut the last trench, you must first spread the spoil pile from the first trench. As the last trench is cut, the stump is not supported on any side and will start to twist as you cut off the final roots. A straight-on push uses the power of both tracks to remove the stump. There are hundreds of things good operators can do to make each job better, faster, and safer. In this program, we've only touched on a few. With operating a dozer, there's always something new to learn. And any pro will tell you, that's what keeps the job interesting.